Hello, my name is Douglas today, and I'm going to read the daily reflections for October 3rd, 2025. It's called Serenity After the Storm. Someone who knew what he was talking about once remarked that pain was the touchstone of all spiritual progress. How heartily we AAs can agree with him. That's from the 12 Steps and 12 Traditions book, pages 93 and 94. When on the roller coaster of emotional turmoil, I remember that growth is often painful. My evolution in the AA program has taught me that I must experience the inner change, however painful, that eventually guides me from selfishness to selflessness. If I am to have serenity, I must step my way past emotional turmoil and its subsequent hangover, and be grateful for continuing spiritual progress. That's why I was holding this thing up, because it says, if I have emotional turmoil, I must step in all capital letters. So it made me think of something like this, the 12 Steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. And we're kind of talking about, well, since it's the 10th month, this book is kind of talking about step 10 things. So how might that apply to serenity after the storm and this pain that equals growth at some point? I have an idea. It has to do with, I'm going to read the 10th step here. I don't want to get it wrong. The 12 Steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, Step 10. Continue to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. Period. The end of the 10th step from the book. How might you step your way around emotional turmoil? When on the roller coaster of emotional turmoil, I remember that growth is often painful. So if anybody out there knows anything about, I don't know, human muscles and lifting weights or resistance training, there's pain involved. And there's kind of like the right amount of pain. Maybe pain isn't the best word, but I'm going to try and make this simple. Say I pick up this book. Oh, and that wasn't quite strenuous enough. So then I get another book. And now I left two books. Whoa, okay, now that was painful because I didn't have all the full strength to lift that. But having damaged that muscle a little bit by that pain, by exerting myself carefully without injury, it caused the muscle to do stuff. And what it did is, I think the pain involved was the muscle fibers separating in some fashion. And then you need recovery time. They grow back together, and when they do, they're a bit stronger for some reason. I don't know if it's scar tissue. I don't know. I'm not a doctor. All I know is that if you kept lifting, well, this one book, one time a day, you're probably not ever going to cause any kind of growth to that muscle or the muscle group that's lifting it. We need to get up to the point where it is painful, within reason. So, emotions, the way I was when I was drinking, this might be kind of a long, let me see if I can come at it this way. At one point, I think I was an adjusted human being. And then alcohol came along. I tried it. It made me physically ill. I threw up, but I drank more almost as soon as possible, a week later, say. I'm going to spare a bunch of details. And I kind of forced myself, you could put it this way, I guess, that it was painful for me to drink, so I just kept on, and then it became easier to drink. I was tolerating that amount of pain without throwing up any longer, and I liked that feeling, whatever it was, the feeling of drunkenness. But I would always drink until I blacked out, and then like the next day, the next week, for months, who knows how long, I wouldn't be able to remember what I did when I was drinking. So I missed out on a lot of stuff. And then I had some traumas in my life. I'm trying to keep this simple. And I found that immediately after suffering some kind of emotional pain because of a traumatic incident, some kind of tragedy even, I would just drink alcohol and it would numb that feeling out. And then that feeling would want to come back at a later date or time, and then I would drink again. This is the simple way of me putting this. So I wasn't feeling a lot of emotions because I stayed drunk. I'm going to leave it at that. Now, when I got sober, I didn't have that crutch of alcohol any longer to filter out these painful emotions, memories, and then new experiences. And that was pain. That was painful. That's where the emotional growth is happening, because in a sense, like I put down the alcohol and picked up that book again, and it was heavy because I had added a lot more emotional baggage to it through the decades of drinking and the decades of blocking out basically all emotions. They were stacking up. That was the weight that I had to lift when I got sober, and I trying to sift through things sober, and it was painful because I wanted to stop. I didn't want to feel any more pain. It was very painful. It hurted me, and the way I used to cope with the alcohol was I would get drunk and then I would not understand or feel how much pain I was in. So, when I got sober, I was suicidal a bit. I hadn't tried anything yet. If anything, my plan was to just keep drinking until I fell over dead, whenever that might be. And that's about all the kind of thought or plan I had to that. Okay, how does this relate to the 10th step? I don't know yet. Still trying to establish today's reading. Serenity after the storm. Well, I'm going to read this again. Now that you heard a little bit about my story, let's read this again. Serenity after the storm. I was looking for that. That is for certain. But I wasn't sure if I wanted to go through enough pain to accomplish that. Someone who knew what he was talking about once remarked that pain was the touchstone of all spiritual progress. Those are key words right there. How heartily we AAs can agree with him. That's from the 12 Steps and 12 Traditions book, pages 93 through 97. When on the roller coaster of emotional turmoil, I remember that growth is often painful. My evolution in the AA program has taught me that I must experience the inner change, however painful, that eventually guides me from selfishness to selflessness. If I am to have serenity, I must step my way past emotional turmoil and its subsequent hangover, and be grateful for continuing spiritual progress. I thought of another, if you can see that, it's got step in all capital letters. I must step my way past emotional turmoil. Maybe that means don't try and run over these rough patches in your life and just try and somehow forget about them, because that will just eventually happen anyways, the forgetting part. And it doesn't say that I need to jump over my emotional problems or my painful emotional memories. And that's what I was doing with alcohol. So maybe the step could also mean that, is that you're to walk slowly, stepping, mindful of each step, my way past emotional turmoil and its subsequent hangover, and be grateful for continuing spiritual progress. So, like I said earlier here, what's the touchstone of all spiritual progress? It says is pain is the touchstone. So if there's some pain, there's very likely going to be some kind of emotional or spiritual progress. This, I think that's leaving something out, because when people say things like you make a mistake, that's all right, but it's only all right if you learn from that mistake and then maybe you grow a bit so you don't do that same behavior again, causing pain as a result. I feel kind of foggy on that, but when on the roller coaster of emotional turmoil, let's think about this in a sober state. Now that I've been sober like 20 years, for the first, if you look at this little diagram, I didn't try and indicate this clearly, but these steps here, you might say they're more stable than, there's no treads here. It's just an idea from the third step on, kind of in this picture. These days, being emotionally sober, let's call it that, and the emotions these days aren't so, it isn't the massive G-force roller coaster ride that they used to be. And they're the same emotions, and sometimes they come on really heavy, but this is the good part, is I know that they're all essentially memories. I'm not actually experiencing that right this minute, and I can choose to think about something else. And I might be in pain for a while, but that it's not so bad any longer. And I don't need to take a bunch of drugs to get through that, to step through it. So there's like a spiritual component involved here, that I'm still the same physical bunch of cells, membranes, and particles in the same, it's all the same. Well, let's just stick with that. Give me a second. The belief system up inside my head here is different. I used to believe Jack Daniels will fix this, to keep it simple. Now I know that's a lie for me. I'm an alcoholic. Jack Daniels doesn't fix anything anymore. Belief in a power greater than Jack Daniels, belief in a power greater than my addiction maybe, It's just a different belief over here that I believe in now. That if I can keep my hands off the situation and stop trying to fix everything when I don't know how, I'm probably going to be a more relaxed kind of fellow. So, the 10th step says what? It says, continue to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. I've written a note here. I don't know what it means right this minute. Admitting isn't the problem, but being wrong can be. When I was wrong, I promptly admitted it because I took a daily inventory. And what that taught me, the pain. Here, let's get back to that. I don't know how the spiritual part hooks into this here yet, right this second. Okay, remember I said I had all these stuff in my brain causing me pain, the memories. Alcohol took that pain away for a bit, and then it didn't anymore. It didn't work anymore. And then I had all the problems with alcoholism, being broke, physiologically dying, and I still had the painful memories because I'd run out of booze. And then being broke, I couldn't get more. Okay, just a bad spot. And then I got sober, and here 20 years into sobriety, this is why I'm still kind of the same in a way, that the memories and all that stuff sometimes are still up there, and they come back painfully. And I don't use alcohol to deal with that pain any longer. I use, let's say, spiritual progress. And how does that work with the 10th step? The way that works for me is that when I'm going through life and I do something wrong, I try to promptly admit that, because even as painful as it is, being wrong, admitting isn't the problem that you're wrong, but being wrong could be a problem if you don't try and fix it. That still isn't fitting for me, that little note. But my point here is that promptly admitting to a wrong and trying to correct it or learn from your mistake is going to lessen the overall amount of pain involved. If you're going through life, it's fine. You go through life, you do something wrong, it's a bump in the road, and then you carry on. But you remember you hit that bump, and then you're doing it again and again and again, say, for example, and you don't know what to do. Well, that's step 8. Let me pull this out again. There's 12 steps. Somewhere down here, step 8 says, made a list of all people we had harmed, persons we had harmed, and became willing to make amends to them all. And then step 9, which I was talking about last month, made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. And now step 10, continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. This could be that emotional hangover, I think, that the reading was mentioning today. My evolution in the AA program has taught me that I must experience the inner change, however painful, that eventually guides me from selfishness to selflessness. If I am to have serenity, I must step my way past emotional turmoil and its subsequent hangover, and be grateful for continuing spiritual progress. Serenity after the storm. The serenity and the calmness that I experience for some pretty broad spans of time during each day, which is a welcome relief from the high G-force emotional turmoil I was in all through my drinking and drunkenness, and then into early sobriety, because I didn't know how to step my way past these things. I didn't have an effective coping strategy. I just didn't, a part of all that, I just hadn't been sober long enough to dry out, I think. So the spiritual belief is big in this, that I'm hesitant to get into this because it's just such a big subject, I think. The steps explain it, and I'll tell you what, this is only the third day of October, and all through this month we're going to be talking, I think, about the 10th step. So if you can just stick with me throughout the month, we'll find out together how would a spiritual thing fit into this continued personal daily inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitting it. Here, a quick one. In here it said, to move from my evolution, moving from selfishness to selflessness. Maybe being selfish is painful, and being selfless is less painful or not painful. Okay, so I'm going to keep that in mind, and I'll have to get back with you later. Thank you. Goodbye.